apologies to anybody who's about to show up right now because we started super late. That is actually on me. We are figuring out technology right now.
Technology is like its own weird thing, so it's not just you. I legit thought we were going, so I'm like, hey, let's go.
And then we were like talking, and I was like looking at it, I was like, oh snaps, it says this live video is hidden. And I was like thinking, I was like, I swear there's like a red live somewhere that's supposed to pop.
Spot in the corner, I'm like, okay, this is fine. I know, whatever.
Oh,
we're good. We're good.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay. Hey, what is going on, everybody? This is Miguel from Barbell Academia with Joshua Walters from the Human Movement Rehab. So for this week's educational drop, we are going to be going over the topic of exercising while injured. All right, so first off, I want to go ahead and just introduce Joshua, who he is. So for those who do not know, as I previously said, he is owner of the Human Movement Rehab. He is a physical therapist based out of Fort Worth, Texas. Not only is he a physical therapist, though, he's an Olympic weightlifting coach and a fitness coach. At this point, Joshua, I'm going to go ahead and hand the reins over to you. Tell the people what you're about and what is the message you're trying to get across.
Well, first of all, thanks for the nice intro. You make me sound way cooler than I actually am. But in all reality, I'm a guy who really loves to see people get better and kind of reach their potential. So I'm a curious person who likes to learn from a bunch of different people about how to do things. And I'm also a big proponent of, like, just because you're hurt doesn't mean we have to stop.
That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. Yeah, and for people who do not know, Joshua is actually my own coach. There's a whole reason why I wanted to get him on this live. I think he has some great ideas that actually needs to be shared. And he's just all about the people, trying to give people what they want as far as training goes, making sure people stay on track. He's actually the guy who helped me get back from a herniated disc, which is a no-joke injury. I'm not going to lie to you. That had to have been probably the worst 6 months of my life.
Right.
Luckily, ran into Joshua. He was like, hey, man, that doctor said you can't lift weights. Like, that's crazy, man. We're going to get you back on that platform. We're going to get you back competing. And he did. Not only did he get me back on the platform competing, he got me to qualify for the under 25 nationals, which is probably my proudest accomplishment yet. All thanks to him. So I have to give him big props on that one. All right. So let's go ahead. Let's just jump right into that first topic, and let's just answer the question right off the bat. Should you be exercising while you're injured, Joshua?
I'm going to absolutely say yes. I think there are definitely certain contexts where we can be smart about how we continue to exercise, but absolutely, like, bodies are meant to move and adapt that way, so we just want to find a good game plan of where to start. What do you think?
Honestly, I have to say I agree 100%. Nothing kills me more than when I see a client. It doesn't happen too much in person because you're actually there with the person, you kind of work through the things. But for those remote people, you check their program at the end of the week, or, they maybe aren't as communicative with you, and you look at the program at the end of the week and you're like, oh, snaps. I was like, why did this guy only do upper body days? Like, he's a 4 to 5 day a week guy normally, and he's supposed to do upper, lower, rest, upper, lower, and, so on and so forth. So you shoot him a message, right? You're like, hey, man, noticed you only did upper. So it's like, what's going on with that? And it turns out, over the weekend, man, I tweaked my ankle and I just couldn't squat. I couldn't really do much. I'm like, okay. I was like, well, first of all, you should have messaged me when it happened. Like, I was like, there's absolutely no reason for you to have stopped training. There are definitely ways to work around it. If you tweaked your ankle in a soccer match, well, let's test out your squat. Let's test out, ankle flexion, extension. What causes the pain? As you were saying, how do we work around it? It doesn't necessarily have to be like stop, quit moving, don't do anything at all. It just has to be how can we work around it?
Yeah. I'm a big proponent of the can-dos. I think we've talked about it before too. Like, find what you can do, and like we can maximize that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the most important part, because once you stop moving, that's the injury one. It's going to stick around a lot longer once you quit moving.
Sure.
All right. For those just joining in, I have Joshua Walters, owner of the Human Movement Rehab, with me here to discuss exercising while injured. All right, Josh. So in your experience, what was the best approach to getting a person back to their sport or just back to their fitness goals?
So it kind of depends. I want to first kind of define a few terms. Number one, when we're going to talk about injury in this conversation, I want to keep it to more tissue-based injuries. So typically, I define an injury as like the tissue demand was exceeded and usually led to tissue failure, whether that's, a sprain, a muscle strain, a tear, a break. We're going to kind of keep it more to that, just to kind of be more explicit in this conversation.
Yeah.
So when it comes to return to sport, I also want to kind of divide it up into a couple categories. I tend to take the same principles, but kind of apply it in different buckets. So for bucket number one, I'm thinking more of like our avid fitness, enthusiasts, some of our personal training clients, our weekend warriors, people who just want to do fun stuff and enjoy just, the day to day. Those type of goals, as far as like finding the right approach, is a little bit different than, let's say, like my competitors. So some of my strength competitors, since I mostly work in that field, or even some of my field sport athletes, the goals look a little different depending on whether we're in season, kind of working up towards a competition, or out of season for just general maintenance. And then for my elite performance athletes, so like I also work part-time with the Dallas Jackals professional rugby club. Our goals for managing an injury in season are going to look a little bit different for like injury risk reduction in the off season, as far as like how do we structure our program, how do we structure our maintenance phase type stuff. But the principles kind of stay all the same. Number one, like we first mentioned, is like find your can-dos, number one. So for my regular gym goers, kind of check and see what causes, more discomfort. Is it stuff that you can kind of work through? Is it something that works around? Like, where are we at in the current situation with what you are? Information is good. I'm not going to refute people going to Dr. Google, but just kind of keep in mind that Dr. Google is either going to be very generic, for a wide variety of people and a wide variety of information, or it's not context specific to you. So that's why it helps to have a coach or somebody that you can kind of pick questions and ask about to kind of give you a good framework of where to start. And then from there, it's finding what's the biggest goal for that person, kind of, what's a 30-foot view, a 300-foot view, and a 30,000-foot view. So if we just got to go like 2 days later, this is kind of what we're looking at. If we're looking at something like 3 weeks down the line, this also kind of changes the plan. If we're looking 3 months down the line, like that also kind of changes how we can gradually approach things.
100% agree. And just to bring it back to that, Googling, your injuries, people, look at the sources you are using. For those who do not know, and I'm just going to, this is kind of something they teach us, just growing up, but for those who do not know, if there is a .com, if there are ads, cut it. That's not a good resource. You got to watch out for those. Your best resources are going to be your .gov sites, and also keep in mind what is the research articles. If it's just somebody spewing a bunch of facts at you, even research articles have I'm blanking on the word.
Citations, usually.
Citation, yes, they have citations in them. So people, keep in mind, stay away from your .coms, stick to your .govs, kind of stay within that range, and look out for citations. That's the first thing. Yeah. But best thing is to reach out to a professional, such as, if you're feeling hurt, reach out to a physical therapist such as Joshua. And if you're looking to get fit, start working out, reach out to a, personal training professional such as me or Joshua as well. All right, so last topic we're going to discuss. Which is better for injury recovery? Gradual overload or high volume for an extended period of time?
It's a good question. I think both approaches have validity in different circumstances. And I kind of find myself using each one in kind of different circumstances. But before we even get to that point, I'm a big proponent of mastering the basics. So if I've got an athlete, or I've got a client, or I think everybody kind of has athletic prowess, I want to talk to him about, like, what are the things we can control? So our controllables start with, how's your sleep? Are you getting, average 7 to 9 hours a night? And I think most people would probably say no, because like sleep is one of those things I think we undervalue, but have like exponential return. So I'm just as guilty. I got to preach to the choir as well. Hydration is another one. It's another low-hanging fruit that sometimes just gets overlooked. Tissue health definitely goes hand in hand with hydration. So it's a big one that, like, once you kind of get stuff going in the right direction, we tend to see things trend better. Stress management, so whether that's work stress, life stress, training is also a stressor too. Are we doing a good job of understanding how this person is tolerating what training is looking like? Are we just not taking care of the other stuff around it? The last one's nutrition, and I keep that one pretty generic because, you know, for us, it could be very fitness goal specific. Are we looking at physique things? Are we cutting too much too early? For like in-season maintenance stuff, are we taking in enough to actually make it through, you know, every practice, every training session, that kind of stuff? So again, it's more context specific for that, for those things as well.
Yeah, and even like coming from, you know, like I like how you mentioned the stress management. I think that's something that, not along with the sleep and the hydration, I think stress is the next thing that everyone skips. I'm even guilty of that. I'm like, I'm had a solid training day on Monday, and all of a sudden life just starts kicking my ass at like by Wednesday, and I'm like, I hit my Friday training session. I'm like, hey coach, I can't hip snatch 90 right now. What's going on? And it's like, well, how's your week going? It's like, well, you know, work's kind of getting me down, you know, maybe I lost a client, you know, maybe, you know, my other job's not going so good. So it's just like those little things, exactly what you're saying, that stress management, learning how to manage everything is going to play a huge factor in your training, because everyone thinks, well, I just went to go train. And this goes for, you know, bodybuilding training to powerlifting to weightlifting to anything. If you cannot manage these stress levels, if you can't manage your hydration, your sleep, it'll just, yeah, exactly as you're saying, Isaiah, it will push it over. Exactly. That's a perfect way to put it. It all starts to topple over.
I'm also a big proponent of, like, with stress too, just like with training, you have to kind of have some peaks and valleys. We can't be 1,000% in red line all the time. We're not built to do that. Rest isn't really it shouldn't be a punishment or an afterthought. It should be a priority, and it needs to be, you know, considered. It's not something that it makes you weaker, or, like, you know, if you really think about it, and you know this, you tell your clients all the time, like, you make your gains from all that training while you're asleep. So if you're cutting out your sleep, you're cutting out your own gains. Like, that's
Exactly.
an absolute fact.
Exactly. 8 to 10 hours minimum, people, minimum, you know, like 8 on the minimum, 10 right there's that sweet spot, you know, where it's going to be proven recovery, you know. All right. So I went ahead, I pulled some questions from our audience before this. So the first one up, what is the most common reason an injury tends to get re-aggravated?
I think it goes back to what we were just talking about with load management and stress management, especially in sports where, like, there's a lot of repetitive movements, you know, CrossFit, powerlifting, weightlifting, even like field sports too. If we're not managing, like, our training stressors or how much stuff we're doing pretty well, and just being aware, like, we're kind of beat up and beaten down, there's reasons why you're seeing this big boom in the whole, like, load management or like activity tracker type stuff. It's valuable information, but tends to be like when we either are going outside our sweet spot. So we're either overtraining or underloading and trying to have a big spike in activity, and that tissue is just not usually prepared for it. That's usually when we see re-aggravations of injuries.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. Definitely kind of just tissue just not adjusting all the time, you know. Kind of either overload yourself or you're underloading for too long, and then all of a sudden you try to jump up. So you'll see it a lot with people who are recovering, like, for example, for me with a herniated disc, the biggest task that you had at hand was keeping me pulled back enough but overloading my back, so that way it was feeling the pressure but it wasn't overloading it, so we're just re-aggravating, you know. So yeah, I think that's a good point that you pointed out.
It brings up a good point, and I remember us talking about it a lot with your rehab, and I try to bring this up with a lot of my clients, is we shouldn't fear symptoms. I think sometimes we're afraid of that pain or kind of like a negative symptom. I take that as like a piece of information. So let's say, you know, and you've gone through this with me, I give you like high volume back squats, and you're like, dude, my legs feel like absolute jello right now. Like, that's a good, like, pointer to me. Like, I have found a tolerable threshold, or just at like the ceiling of his tolerable threshold for this right now. This is what I expect to see in a response. A lot of what we do as trainers and in the health professions is we should be more like barometers of people's stress, or how are we adapting to things as we go along. That's a lot of what training is. Like, how do we regulate the ups and downs?
All right, most definitely. All right, so this next one, I actually pulled from your comment section. So, and I thought it was a really good one that we should actually touch base on. So what role does mentality play in training and injuries in the gym?
Oh, big time. Shout out to Sav for bringing this one up because I do think mindset stuff gets overlooked. I'm glad that we now are in a space where we can talk about mental health more openly, and it's such a crucial factor when it comes to managing injury. I think having realistic expectations, like setting your expectations for your plan goes a long way. Whether it's like you're just getting started with your fitness journey or like you're prepping for, your first 5K or your first marathon or like your first kind of, or like your 100th competition, having a plan prepares you for the things that are coming. And I think it helps you mentally have a roadmap of like, when shit hits the fan, what do we do? Um, when we see recurring injuries, it can lead to what we call more chronic pain or chronic injury or chronic pain syndromes, where like the brain is trying to overprotect itself and keeps resending these signals of like bad feelings and like negative responses, which really it's just trying to protect you from doing things that it doesn't feel like it's ready for. So all the more reason we want your brain and your body got to be on the same page. For like as simple as we can kind of say it. So reminding yourself that rest is okay. It doesn't have to be absolute rest, but like being intelligent with it. Take care of yourself where you need to, and kind of get back to the basics. Like where in those like four things, sleep, hydration, stress management, nutrition. Where can we at least make some improvements and kind of give your body time to catch up?
Yeah, I totally agree with it. I mean, just taking it from the thought process of, okay, are you present during your workouts?
Big
So
time.
if we're not present, and especially it can get kind of dangerous when you're thinking of like being under heavy loads, like in powerlifting, strongman, Olympic weightlifting, bodybuilding, you can kind of be a little bit less out of your mind and focus more on muscle, contraction, that type of deal. It doesn't have to be as, heavily thought on, you more so just want to think about the muscles you're working. But when it comes to being under heavy loads, not being there mentally that day, yeah, that's just something in of itself. Kind of just putting it in perspective of how can that affect your injury. So if you're already injured or you've had an injury, maybe you're just not thinking too hard that day, or maybe you're overthinking the injury, and all of a sudden, maybe you hyperextend your back a little bit and it seizes. So, and like, for example, that happened to me a couple weeks ago. I just wasn't thinking. I hyperextended and it seized up a little bit. So being there present, I was like, okay, let me go ahead, just pull back a little bit on the weights and just kind of pull back, do some conditioning stuff afterwards, and I was all good. Literally the next week I was fine. So, kind of just being there mentally during your training days. And like you were saying, keeping in mind those mental factors, mental stress, keep it low, nutrition, all that other things, those will kind of play a factor into that as well.
Also, it'll be okay if the day just isn't there. The day just isn't there. I love the Chris Moore quote, like any day that you touch the barbell or any day that you do something where you're 1% better or like you get something to train, like training is a gift. It's a blessing. So like that's a good day. It may not be the day that you expected. It may not be the day that you planned for on your program, but it's still a positive day. And that has value, far beyond whatever the goal is too. And it's okay that sometimes when you don't feel 100%, you sometimes have your best days. I mean, how many times have you gone to the gym, feel like absolute trash, and you destroy the workout, like either PRing something or just like your body just feels better. Like that's the cool part about what we get to do is like we can have a plan, and like Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan to get punched in the face. Sometimes that plan gets punched in the face for the better too. Like we just see good things happen. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, most definitely. All right, so for those just joining in, I have Joshua Walters here, owner of the Human Movement Rehab, and we are tackling the topic of should you be exercising while injured. All right, so this one is actually one I put in. I just kind of wanted to get your perspective on it because I do have my own opinion about it, but I was interested to see from a physical therapist, from someone who also works with professional athletes, because I feel like this is pretty predominant in that field possibly. What's your opinion? I'm injured. Ice or no ice?
Okay. I still lean in the camp of swelling management needs to be part of the game plan. Whether it's I still kind of lean more in the ice campaign for two reasons. Number one, it's still part of like tissue recovery. I tend to lean more towards it when I do see active swelling kind of in the region. Um, and again, I usually will make the suggestion 10 to 30 minutes tops. We don't want to let the swelling cycle just keep on perpetuating over and over again. They also, too, it's very much a placebo thing as well. Sometimes, especially in like my elite athletes or even just like my really motivated people, I need to just give them something to do to make them feel like we're doing something towards the goal. And it's like very low harm, low stress, low whatever. Isaiah, you bring up a good point. It kind of depends on the tissue. I tend to say heat goes a little bit better usually with muscle and tendon type stuff. I tend to lean ice more towards like joint related things, but even for muscle and tendon swelling as well. Both have their benefits. I usually will say pick the stuff that feels good and roll with that. And then we have bigger, more actionable things that we're planning for later. All right.
Good.
What are you, Captain No Ice? You know, where are we at? Just like grit your teeth, rub some dirt on it. What's up?
I'm in the camp of no ice, man. So and my reason behind this is it's this. So for me personally, movement is medicine, and you take the same approach. I'm not saying anything that you weren't, but at the end of the day, it's like you said with my professional athletes. Sometimes you're just throwing an ice pack on them so they feel like they're getting something done, and then you're actually pushing them to go do something of a movement. So I think, like you were saying, though, it is more of a placebo effect. There are some benefits. I mean, they have done some studies where it does show that it reduces swelling, but it's temporary. I think it's one thing that's always missed out. It's temporary. So personally, I think you just got to move around. If it really hurts that day, I'm not opposed. I'm not going to tell somebody don't put ice on it. It's and like you're saying, Isaiah, ice then eventually heat. Yes, if that makes you feel better, by all means. At that point, we're trying to make you feel better. But understand that shouldn't be your go-to answer for every single injury, because that's at the end of the day not going to do anything. You have to be able to move. You have to be able to just move through it. And I'm not saying you tweaked your back on a 405 back squat and you're like, man, nah, I can do this. Like, no, it's like, okay, where's the pain level at? And also, let's just back off. Maybe even just backing off to 225, 315, and you don't feel the pain. Well, it's like, okay, well, that's a win. That means, it's not a super bad tweak. Now, do you need to go ice it? Personal preference. I mean, it's really up to the person. Like, I'm not going to say. So I'm in the camp of no ice, but, movement is medicine at the end of the day.
I like that. And I think there's absolute validity to it, too. I try to look at the macro perspective. One small change in like the grand scheme of things probably isn't going to, derail an entire plan. So like if I talk to my rugby guys after a game, like I just saw them literally tackle 30 people for like the full 80 minutes, I'm probably going to say, do what feels good, bro. Like, we're going to have treatment tomorrow. Like, I got you. Just like,
go hop in that ice bath, bro.
You earned it. Go. Like, it's not.
Exactly.
And then, but they know that the grand scheme of things is we've got a bigger plan, that this is just one like information point at the time. And the same thing with like in your training session example, if that heavy back squat is not there, is this something that we can either change the plan to adapt to later, or is there something in the session that we can still do to get better for that day? And that's usually kind of the approach of the modifications I put with any of my clients. Is like, what can we do on this day that helps us achieve the steps towards whatever the goal is?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that perspective. That's perfect right there. All right, guys. Well, that is a wrap on this topic for Educational Drop. If you guys would like to see Joshua again, please, I'm going to be posting this at a later date. Please comment and then give us some suggestions on some topics you want us to cover. We can pick them all day, but, we want to talk about stuff that y'all want to talk about. So let us know. Joshua, where can these beautiful, strong people find you? I want you to go ahead and plug yourself, plug what you're about, and let us know.
So I am on Instagram as DocJW with an underscore. You can find me most weekends now rocking the Jackals gear, Shout out to Dallas Jackals. On the sidelines of the team, the schedule is on the Dallas Jackals website. When I am in clinic, I'm out of Panther City Strength Gym, doing personal training, doing online coaching, doing something that keeps me not bored at that point. But yeah, more than happy to have a conversation, come by, get a little sweat in, talk about anything. And yeah, looking forward to seeing everybody do some cool stuff.
Awesome. 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 All right, guys. Well, thank you guys so much for watching this live with us. Can't wait to do this again.